Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by the letter H. Aw, thanks, letter H. You're my favorite letter. Let's start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by the Milkmaster 2000. There's a better way to pour your milk, and it begins with the Milkmaster 2000. Operators are standing by while supplies last. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We like to discuss, review, analyze movies from the standpoint of people who, play around in the industry a little bit in varying degrees. Todd's a full-time producer. I've been a full-time writer, director, filmmaker for, I don't know, almost right at 12 years. This is my 12th year on the month. And so crazy time flying right on bicycles.
Man, I remember when you quit that job to do this. And it was crazy.
It is. And what's funny about that is I just wanted to do this for them, for this media company, because they had me doing more analytics and, running at the time, it was like the largest YouTube channel in the world and full of, mediocre DIY content. And I just wanted to do more creative stuff. I'd been acting for, 6-7 years at that point. And I just wanted to be more creative and get on that side of the team. And they were like, nah, we like you where you are. And I was like, okay, well, nah, like I'm out. And I left. And then of course they started hiring me to do the thing I wanted to do in the first place. And just slowly, piece by piece, built a little bit of a career, and it's been fun. It's been interesting, the twists and turns that goes along with almost accidentally, because really I left to do acting, and along the way just kept working on the filmmaking aspect and just fell really in love with telling a whole story from soup to nuts and just building it out. And it's crazy just because I started really doing more traditional work and then transitioned into doing a lot of VR, AR content. And now feeling like, whoa, I've spent way too much time thinking about 360 content. I need to be focusing way more on traditional two-dimensional stuff. And it's just crazy how quickly transitioning away from that stuff, and you're not getting your reps in, you're not getting your practice in. It's like, oh wait, I need to make sure I'm doing those things, because technology is moving. If you're used to shooting on HMIs and whatever Kinos, like, what, no one's using that stuff anymore. You need to make sure you're getting the latest whatever Titan tubes and apertures and whatnot. And so just getting your reps in, making sure you're staying on top of your game. And I find myself that over the last couple of years, like, okay, hold on, let me make sure I'm thinking through, normal production work, and putting together a new reel and leaning into things that I wasn't excited about before. I wasn't excited about commercial work, and I'm getting more excited again about more traditional, just commercial cinematography. And it's like, oh, hey, this is fun. This is a whole different element and something else I can lean into and like push myself in new directions. Like, what's scaring me right now? Okay, go scare the shit out of yourself doing that stuff. Like, because that's where your growth is. Whatever's scaring you in the moment is where your growth is waiting for you. And so I'm excited to kind of open up old habits again and say, okay, what else can you learn? Where else can you get better? Where else can you grow? Yeah. I don't know. What scares you? What do you need to be doing that you're not doing?
What scares me?
Clowns.
Man, that's a good question. I think if I have to pick something, not that I'm avoiding doing it, but is playing music live.
Oh, wow.
Right now scares me. Again, I'm not avoiding it. I don't have a band out here in California.
But it's funny that you say that. Just me on the outside hearing that. It's not because you're inexperienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
To
many
your
live
point,
shows have you done?
Oh,
Like,
hundreds. Yeah.
Hundreds, probably getting upwards of 1,000 at some point, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Depending on what you consider a live performance. I mean, if it's an audience, it's live.
That's true.
And my God, like,
Yeah, I don't know.
and yet, like, it's like, man, I haven't done it in so long. What's that feel like? Nerves and doing it on a new context.
I don't know how to handle the nerves necessarily. Like, they were always good. You know, it wasn't like ever like a God, I wish I wasn't here kind of thing. But yeah, if you're not used to nerves, then they feel wrong. They feel like you're doing something wrong, or like that you want to run away. It was funny, like when I stopped playing music, years ago, and I went into triathlon, I had the nerves. Oh, I had way worse nerves than when going on stage. Going on stage is like, you know, you got butterflies and stuff, like, you know, but it was always good because as soon as you started, like they went away, but like right before you you just felt like this energy surging through you. But before a race, I was just scared. I was just always just so scared. Like, okay, this is gonna hurt for a long time, and it's gonna you might die at the beginning in the swim. It's always terrible. So I had that. Now I don't have either of those things because I don't perform live and I'm not racing anymore. So I'm just kind of comfortable in that regard. But yeah, I would say that's probably what I'm scared of. It's a good question. I haven't asked myself that in a long time.
That's really cool. Yeah. So I don't know, listener, like, go scare yourself. Like, go do something that you don't feel comfortable doing, and then do it until you do feel comfortable, until it becomes your comfort zone. And then find something else that scares you. Yeah. What's scaring us today, bro?
Exactly. I was waiting for that transition. I was like, come on, let's do it. Let's do it. Today, we are covering Fury, it is streaming on Netflix now. So, at least at the time of this recording. So if you have not seen that film, please pause this episode, go watch it. We're going to spoil a lot of stuff.
So much to talk about. We'll look at some of the cinematography, of course, look at a little bit of the contrast as well as motivating light. And of course, we will dive a little bit into the story and writing, discuss Norman's arc, some of the sound design, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A grizzled tank commander makes tough decisions as he and his crew fight their way across Germany in April 1945. It's written and directed by David Ayer. Cinematography by Roman Vasyanov. It's featuring Brad Pitt as Don, Wardaddy, Logan Lerman as Norman, Shia LaBoeuf as Boyd, Michael Peña as Gordo, Jon Bernthal as Grady, and Alicia von Rittberg, or Wittberg, if it's German, I don't know, as Emma.
We trapped an entire Kraut army, pulling back into Germany. We fucked them up.
Yep.
Yes, we did. There was dead Krauts and horses, busted up tanks, and cars for miles. Miles.
Hmm?
Your eyes see it, but your head can't make no sense of it. And we go in there. And for 3 whole days, we shoot down wounded horses all day long. Sun up to sundown, just shooting horses. And there was some hot summer days.
I never smelled nothing like that, Todd.
Do you know how you kill a horse? You pat it on the forehead, no? And it becomes your fate. It goes like this. And then you shoot it right through the spine. And the sound of it? Those fucking screaming horses. And do you remember that, Don? All the black clouds of flies just buzzing around. It was like being in a giant beehive. But you weren't there.
fine story. Pleasant mealtime talk. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It is what happened, Don. What happened. What's going to happen is going to happen. Sitting here playing house at a couple bitch crowds ain't going to change a fucking thing.
Shut the fuck up.
Why should I shut up?
You shouldn't.
In a movie, it's about killing people. Really, that's what this movie is about. It's so fascinating that they kind of rediscover their humanity by talking about killing horses. Like, the horses didn't do anything to them. They're innocent. That's taking innocent lives. And it's, you know, a burden that they're carrying. Not the burden, and maybe it's displaced, you know, a sense of horror. Whereas if you can't process killing humans, now you can kind of process it through the killing of these horses. I don't know how to process that scene. What sticks out to you, I guess, about that scene and just about this movie?
I mean, I think you just put it in perspective. I think that's perfect. Because I was watching it again thinking like, how do we talk about this scene? What's happening? And I think that's great writing. It's just great writing, man. It's great writing where we can sit here and we talk about movies every week. We watch them, you know, daily almost. And we kind of have taught ourselves how to analyze stuff like this. And then we're watching this scene and I'm thinking, how the hell do we talk about this? What is going on right now? And I think it's great because it's just so many things are coming to a head at this moment. Each of these guys are individuals. Each of these guys have their own feelings and emotions, and they change throughout the film. So you have, Boyd, Gordo, and Grady, right? So we have these guys, and they love Don. They love him. They obviously will go to war with him. They'll die with him. Whatever he tells them to do, they will do. And in this moment, they feel so betrayed by him. They feel like, you remember this terrible thing we went through? That we went through? That this kid was not there? You know, let me remind you of that. And Don allows them. He knows the story. He doesn't need to sit there and listen to them retell it. He knows it. And it doesn't feel like explanation for the sake of the audience either. It feels like because of what we know that they've already been through, that we've seen them already go through, you know, and the failings of Norman, you know, when the tank went at the very beginning, he fails. He doesn't kill those kids, and they destroy the tank and right in front of him, which was, oh my God, what a way to basically start a movie. So we see Norman, we know he's green. He's terrified. He doesn't want to act. He's already failed. And yet he gets to have this experience, you know, having lunch with two beautiful girls. Making love to one. Like, it was just too much for them. So they felt like they needed to bring him back down. And once he was done allowing them, okay, that's enough. Now let me remind you of who I am. And thank you for reminding me of that. Now let me remind you of who I am. You know?
You're right, because he does let them do a lot of stuff. And it's not like that's the only one, because the audience needs that exposition. You're right, because how often does he let them just go on, you know, on these weird he lets Grady, Jon Bernthal's character, just terrorize that girl.
Yeah.
For a while. Like, he lets them get away with licking her egg and, you know, breaking her spirit. and doesn't say anything to him about it. Like he's letting, because I think he also knows they can get it out here or inside the tank.
Yeah.
They can't bring this energy back to the tank. And so out here is when we let him, it's like he's really like this other, I don't know, running the temperature of the tank to keep it cool at all times. He's letting these valves press and release, and he's keeping all that in tune so that whenever it's time to go to war, everyone's ready for war. And it's just this very precious balancing act that he's constantly going through. He's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, just pulling all these levers, although you just don't see him doing it because of how deft he is at handling everything. Oh,
dude, so great. What a great leader. And let's just start off by saying, I mean, any war movie with Brad Pitt in it, I'm in.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Come on. Of course, we'd love to watch him destroy Nazis. Like, it's like my favorite pastime. And first thing I wanted to say really about the entire movie was how brilliant is it to tell the story inside of a tank. Like, because when I watch World War II movies, it's always, these, maybe it's a battalion or it's a group of guys who are trying to, move across the country, and then some tanks show up and they have a hard time with it, but they eventually destroy the tank. It's like, a lot of times what happens.
Or the tank, is on their side and it's relief, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because
exactly.
they're unstoppable. It's a tank. Like that's a whole saying in society now. Like,
exactly.
And yeah, you're right. And so now, well, what's it actually like to be inside the tank? Are you unstoppable?
Yeah. And you're not unstoppable. So, and to learn more, and you learn a lot about the tanks too. Some of them have that armor, like the one Nazi tank that they just
Tiger.
could not destroy. They kept shooting and couldn't destroy it. And it felt like it's so weird. It's like a submarine battle almost. It felt like, like pull forward. Now when I yell hard right or whatever, and and then fire, it felt like a slow motion, kind of like just like a slow motion battle where you're thinking, could they just get out and run around? Like, no, probably not. But the point is that these tanks are not indestructible, and they are full of people. They are full of men. And to remind us of that by telling a story of one of them is just fantastic. And it becomes our home as the viewer, when so many of these, and they're all great, but so many of these war films, especially like World War II, World War I, where you have a lot of soldiers marching, you don't have like a home base, like a place where you feel as the viewer, like this is home. And you have that here in this tank, with this tank. And so when the tank breaks down at the end, you're like, and the army's coming, you're like heartbroken. You're like, wait, this is home. Like, what are we going to do? And then they're talking about running away. You're thinking, no, don't abandon your home. But yet in my heart, I'm thinking, yes, abandon your home. Just go run. Live. So yeah, it's just a brilliant idea to tell a story from the point of view of the tank, and then these guys, and to introduce a young, very green, like so green he doesn't even know how to work a gun, gunner, essentially, who fails and then succeeds, right? And I don't mean, when I say succeeds, I don't mean lives, even though he does. I mean he succeeds. He doesn't, he stays there with the men. He doesn't abandon them. He fights to the very end. And yes, he's scared. And man, I just love all the acting in this film. And Logan Lerman, what else has he been in? Because this kid was incredible. I just love when you first meet, what has he been in?
Oh, Perks of Being a Wallflower, which I love.
Oh man, I need to go back and watch that.
Yeah.
But when the tank first at the beginning, when they get their orders to go to to go to leave the base, and he's first in the tank, and they're leaving the base. The look of fear on his face is fantastic. I mean, I really don't think it could have been done any better. Honestly, I believed it every second of it, and there was never a moment where I felt like, oh, that was kind of a lax delivery, or that felt fake or unjustified or too much or whatever, not enough. It always just felt right. And what do I know? I've never been in war, but I can tell fear when I see it on somebody's face. I can tell concern or worry. I can tell anger when I see it on someone's face, because I'm human, and I can tell if it feels genuine, and it always did. And of course, you know, you're always going to get a good performance from Brad Pitt, but he's always usually this like leader-esque kind of guy. And he plays that role really well. Shia LaBoeuf is like fantastic. This is one of my favorite roles of him. He does have this way of convincing you to love him. In any role that he's in. I don't know how, even the really difficult ones, you know.
Honey Boy.
Honey Boy, exactly. I was just thinking that. I still love him. And he just brings that. He brings himself to the film. But anyway, yeah, Norman's character is just fantastic. And in the end, you're thinking, when he knows he's going to die, like he thinks, oh, I'm going to die. You can see the fear in his face. He's like, starts breathing heavy. Like, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I do? When they're about to come into the tank at the very end. And we're sitting there thinking as a viewer, like, I don't know if I can handle him dying. It's one thing, the other guys, you know, the other guys, they're like grizzled and seasoned, and they this is what they signed up for. And you know that, you know, we've watched them do some really, really difficult things. But Norman, like, he's just too young. Like, you know, we're thinking, how is this possible? And, you know, it just happens. Like, finds that way, that door. He tells him about the door, and we're thinking, oh, and for them to never address the door throughout the entire film until the very end. That's great, man.
Yeah.
That's just so great. Why? You don't need to tell us about it. There's no need. There is no reason to know there's a door there, because there is no escape. You are here. You are not going anywhere. And yet this father figure-esque, Don, you know, he gives him the way out. He saves him. He tells him, it's okay. Go, live. It's just a wonderful, wonderful freaking film. And yes, I'm sure that there are inconsistencies, and them just like mowing all of the SS troops down and for hours, I guess it felt like. I don't know. Like, I don't know that would happen, but I totally forgive it, because come on, it's a Nazi film. You want to see them get mowed down, right? So
and Norman stepping in, and it's interesting that I think in like 3 ways at least, they really emphasize that he is young. One, his age difference between him and the others is one way where he steps into the frame and you're like, oh, he is an outsider. He's green. But then just the makeup difference, right? He's clean, like fresh pressed. Like, did they just mint you at the army factory? And you know, then on top of that, just in case you're not paying attention, the decisions that he's making reinforce both of those things. Like, yeah, he hasn't got his hands dirty, you know, metaphorically, and pushing him through. And so it makes sense. You get to the end of the film that he survived. And I think I feel like watching this movie, that's kind of my takeaway, is what does it mean to show up? And Norman's such a useful element in so many ways. We're at the end of the war. The war with Germany ends in May. This is in April, you know, so we're less than a month out from the war being over. And if you were to just plop us in with this unit that's been going for 3 years, you know, made their way from Africa all the way to the heart of Germany, then you're just kind of probably feeling a little gross and like just watching these guys effortlessly kill other people. It's like, there's, I guess, a thing you can watch and take away from that. I don't know that it would be a very satisfying watch. And so inserting Norman, who needs to come to terms with what it means to do what they're doing, to be in war and to make the decisions that you have to make in war, and to find it in yourself, you know, to not just, you know, do your job, but to not hesitate and to lean in and to be psychologically okay with doing all this. Like, we have to watch Norman wrestle with it and fight his own team. He's fighting Don, you know, and Don is forcing him. Don is trying to do what he thinks it takes, you know, and Norman shows up, and our Bible guy, right, Boyd, who sermonizes every chance he gets. What does he say? What does he say? And I love the use of religion in the film. And for us, it's Christianity, but I guarantee any other country, you can insert any other religion here, Islam, or, you know, Hinduism or Buddhism. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how pristine your religion is trying to make you. Whenever you get into war, you're dealing with the same stuff no matter what. And so for us, inserting religion here is really nice to have this line coming from Boyd when he says, just wait until you see what a man can do to another man. Like, that's, if that comes from Grady, it doesn't mean a lot, because that guy is the animal in us. I feel like all these characters are kind of some type of archetype within us, and they all come together to form one person, right? You have the brain, Don, you have the animal, Grady, and you have the direction being provided by Gordo, which is like Spanish for fat. Like, it's funny because he's not a big guy, but it makes me wonder where he picked up that nickname along the way. And then you have, you know, the part of us that's trying to hold on to some sense of religion or God, and that's Boyd. And then you have, you know, Norman, our conscience, who's trying to get out of this war intact. And so you see this all coming through the lens of Norman as he's wrestling with taking lives. And it's not until he really, even the first lives he takes aren't very satisfying to the rest of the crew. Now, Don, because it's the first time he really squeezes the trigger, right, is whenever those Germans are burning, and he's just trying to put them out of their misery. And so it's kind of an easy end for him of, okay, I've killed them, but it was a mercy kill. And Don is over here encouraging you. Yep. Good job. Stack them up. Like, all he sees, and he's trying to reinforce and encourage his guy doing his job. And of course, Gordo leans over. He's like, no, should have let him burn. Like, what are you doing? You don't get it yet. And so there's still all this conflict, even when he's trying to do the right thing. And it's not until he suffers a loss, whenever he has something taken from him, right? Emma, which is, hardest part of the film.
Dude, yeah.
You get through the end of the film. He's the one thing that survives. And it's like the last lines of the film, he's loading up right into the truck. And what does that guy say to him? You're a hero, boy. You know that? And it's asking this question of, is that what it feels like to come home from war and be called a hero? We experience this whole thing through him, and we know he does not feel like a hero.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful...
Even though he is, you know? But how can you feel like that? How can you feel like that when you have one, done the things you've done? Like, heroes, you've always been taught heroes don't do that kind of stuff, right? But you've had to do those things. And then, you know, the way you survive is you like hide in the very end. And just the things that you've seen, I can't even imagine how you feel. But what a great way to end that, to hear that person say that to him and have him respond to it with no response at all, right? Just looking at the tank as they drive away. Just, man, this to me is what makes cinema so great. You know, we're asking these questions. We're like saying these. We watch this film, and it's a hard film to watch, you know, but in the end, we're sitting here having these conversations, and maybe we have differing thoughts about things. Maybe we have the same thoughts, but either way, they're like really good questions that are kind of existential in a way. But this was just a little 2-hour movie about a couple of guys in a tank, you know? But is it really just about a couple of guys in a tank? No, it's not. And that's just such a beautiful thing about film in general, you know, like it's why books are so good. They're so good because you can put in your head what you see from the page. You can create it, right? And this is kind of given to us in a way, a little bit more, but a good film won't give you everything. It'll make you ask the questions and not give you the answers. I really feel like this movie is such a great combination of both of those things. But yeah, anyway.
Completely agree. And I do love that they all die at the end, not because obviously we want our troops or anyone to die in war necessarily, but the fact for me watching a war film, it's always a line that's being rode where you're glamorizing war. And some people ascribe to the idea that you cannot make a war film of any kind without glamorizing war. Like it's just inherent in the fact that you're spending time in war. You can't make an anti-war film with a war film. I forget who, made this commentary, but it might've been Werner Herzog. This popped up in a thread on Reddit like a couple weeks ago, and it's a fascinating question, but it to the degree that you need to have an ending, I think, that reinforces the idea that war is bad and all these dead bodies. Yes, that's the impact of these guys, making a stand against, evil. And they do a good job of reinforcing like the SS is, the worst of the worst. And, there's a certain joy they get out of, or that we perceive that they got out of doing what they did. I mean, you have this guy who's hanging kids, right? Because they won't fight. And that guy gets mowed down. Not a lot of sympathy there to watch that guy get killed. And yet, like, we are watching some exciting stuff, like the tank battle at the end with the tiger. It's exciting and it's fun, as much as it is heartbreaking and gross and just crushes your spirit to see these guys get devastated. Like the gunnery sergeant, whatever, popping out of the tank that gets ripped by a bullet, by its tank shell, is just brutal. And whenever you see Roy go down, like, I didn't know Roy's name up until 5 seconds before he died. And yet I'm like, Roy died, there's a certain amount of, it's conflicted, and it's the nature of a war film to show and make it exciting, like, is where the glamorizing comes from. And it's really, really hard to make a war film that doesn't glamorize war. And I think it's done. And maybe this will be your recommendation. I'm curious what you're going to recommend at the end of the episode. But it's a thing to tackle. And to the extent that you're going to pull back away from it, I think you need to show that sacrifice, that it wasn't fun. Look at our heroes now. They're dead. And this is part of what goes into American culture. We have, the largest military the world has ever seen. It's not even remotely close. You can stack up the next several largest militaries in the world, and they're still not going to equal us. And part of what goes into that is not just the trillions of dollars we pour into, the military, but also the culture that we sustain through movies like Fury. Like, it creates an atmosphere where, kids want to join the military, and that's a whole other, kettle of fish. But of why, you know, they recruit and, you know, who's getting recruited, all that kind of stuff. But seeing, you know, this it helps to see you people do die in war, and the people that you're rooting for and that you come to know and love and respect, who are trying to do the right thing, and they're finding ways to do that, even though it's hard. Like, it's a very big, messy spaghetti, you know, meal to take down. And it's good to see the consequences and to see that sacrifice and to feel it emotionally devastate you. Because the last thing you want to watch in any movie is Brad Pitt die. You just don't want to see that. It doesn't matter what role it is, let alone one where we, along with Norman, feel so much conflict. And it's cool too, because we don't necessarily side with Norman the whole way through. Like you said, watching Norman hesitate and get a whole crew killed.
Man, that was brutal.
It hurts. And to see that, we automatically understand, you know, we're on Don's side. Until then, Don is like got a soldier, you know, hostage. And are we taking prisoners? Well, not this one, you know, and he's forcing literally the gun into his hand and pulling the trigger for him. And now, is Norman complicit? I don't know, but that's the military. Like, you're there and you've signed up. You're just a weapon. You're being pointed in the direction of war, and your assignment is to go and kill people. And so there's so many metaphors you can pull out of just that, of Don grabbing his hand and putting the gun in it and squeezing the trigger for him. It's like, he did it, but did he really? Is it his responsibility? Was it just an order? Was it something he was forced into? War is so messy that way. And this movie is making so many interesting points and emotional. And to your point, Todd, like, it's so emotionally complex, and it's forcing you into asking all these questions, even if you don't think you're asking them. You're feeling it emotionally one way or another. You can't escape this movie without emotionally engaging with all of these elements. And it's brilliant in that way. I don't know where I was going.
No, it's I mean, you know, I say all the time that when we watch films, it's kind of, I'm starting to watch films like this, and just in general with a different lens. I think maybe because I'm getting older and I, you know, my mortality is becoming more prevalent. But films where people are just mowed down and die, I don't like them anymore. It feels cheap, and it feels like those lives were unimportant and unthought of in the filmmaking process of that film. And whereas before it was like, oh, you know, you get like this, you know, kind of I don't know, feeling of oh yeah, okay, yeah, get him. I don't feel that anymore. I feel more humanity in that, and it's hard to watch that and think that it was done with any thought. And I don't feel like that for this. I mean, I feel like, of course, they have to harden themselves to do the horrible things that they have to do. Otherwise, they can't do them. And this, you know, this is our last great war. This is the last time that we fought something that was bigger than ourselves, that was obviously more important and worth, I mean, I wasn't part of it, but worth all of the agony, right? That we had to go through as a country and as of the world. We had to defeat Germany, and otherwise the world would look very different, and it was a terrible thing. So of course they have to harden themselves to do these terrible things, but you can see it weigh on them. So even though, you know, they're killing all of these Germans, it still hurts them. Even if saying terrible things and they're seeming happy about doing it, you know, it's killing their humanity. And there's that essence in the script, essence in their performance that tells you that you can see it through all of the happiness that they're, oh, we're mowing all these people down. yeah, but you can still see that their souls are kind of like dying a little bit. So in the end, it feels a little bit more like a completion, like they've come full circle, and this is a natural thing that should happen now. Now I'm done. I came here to do what I did, and there is no place for me in the world anymore. Almost, and it just felt natural and right. It didn't. That's might be why it didn't feel right for Norman to die, because he still had part of his soul. He hadn't killed that part off. I mean, you could make the case also that that Boyd, Shia LaBeouf's character, that's the reason why he was so religious. He was trying to save his soul the whole time. He obviously didn't want to do these things, but he knew he had to. He's trying to save his humanity. But then it's just really interesting. You got Grady, who's just, I don't know if he had one even going into the war. So good. Jon Bernthal, he's such a unique character actor who can do so much. You can love him in one instant and then hate him in another. And that's just such a good sign of a great actor.
This was the first film where I started to like Jon Bernthal. Like before this, I knew him mostly through The Walking Dead. And that show I just hated, like, for a lot of reasons. The characters were just unredeemable for the most part. And I don't know what it was about his character there. I just didn't like his acting. And I was like, I don't know about this guy. And seeing him as this brute, I hated him, but I recognized how brilliant he is. And by the end, whenever he has that nice little moment in the building with Norman, where he's apologizing, and he's doing it in a very sincere but a very specific Grady way, where he's just kind of laughing. He's like, "I'm sorry. I think you're a really good guy." Like and he just kind of just laughs at it. He's like, "I'm sorry." Okay.
I mean,
and you feel the sorrow in him. You feel the sincerity. It's so good.
It's so good. Every one of these characters, no matter how all the bad things, they get a redeeming moment. It's such great writing. David Ayer, this is a clinic for how to develop characters. I saw I've been watching like these online acting classes too, just to like on the side, just like, learn a little bit more. And I saw this one guy say, if you're writing a script, you need to, and it sounds obvious, but unless you do it, like you are a script writer, you don't know it. When you're writing a script, you need to write a character from the character's point of view, not your own. Otherwise, at the end, you've got 5 or 6 characters who all sound like you, because the cadence is a certain way, the word choicing is a certain way, because you're writing it as you. If I were this guy, I would blah, blah, blah. Well, you're not that guy. That guy is that guy. Who is that guy? That guy talks quickly. That guy talks with an air of confidence. That guy is meek and timid. And I feel like this script is a great example of that. All of these guys are so unique and different. And yes, it's in the acting. Of course it is. Of course they all have their past that they made up and everything. But it was in the writing first, and you can definitely tell. And one of the reasons is that moment, right? It's a great combination of really good acting, because he has to deliver it a certain way that still feels like Grady, but in the fact of like giving him that scene, period. It just it's a great, because Grady needs a redeeming moment. He's been just a total jerk the entire time, especially when Emma dies, and he's just dragging Norman away, and not letting him grieve at all. Just like, no, you're not allowed. You just kind of hate him. And we need to love him because he's about to die. And we need to feel it when he does. And then we absolutely do. And oh my God. The hardest. Yeah. You know what I'm about to say. When Boyd weeps, when Grady, I can't even talk about it right now. without like getting emotional. It just is such an amazing moment because you love Boyd, and to see Boyd in pain because of Grady all of a sudden makes Grady that much more important, and his death that much more important, because that doesn't happen when Gordo dies. Nobody weeps when Gordo dies. Well, but we love Gordo because it's Michael Peña, and how do you not love Michael Peña? But when Grady dies, allowing Boyd to have that moment of sadness and seeing that makes Grady that much more important to us after the fact. And then we're sitting there I was sitting there thinking, was there more to Grady that I didn't notice? Was there more? Did I miss something? Why? Because Grady messed with Boyd the entire time. At the beginning, he's like messing with his mustache, like poking at it and stuff. He's like, "Get off me, man! Get off me!" He just messed with him almost like a big brother. And so I wanted to go back and watch it again and think and with love for Grady, but it's too late because he's gone. Oh, just such a great moment.
Such a great moment. And that moment too, where he's messing with the mustache, is really funny. Like, it's hard to make a 2-hour and change movie and get some sense of the tedious nature of war. Like, it's probably, from what I've, heard and gleaned, like it's long moments of boredom with very intense moments of action. And that little ride down the road is a perfect moment of they just start talking trash to each other, right? Like, does Jesus love Hitler? Same stupid conversation we've been having 3 years. Yes. Like, but it won't, if he repented, yes, he would be welcome into heaven. But, he won't escape man's justice. He's just trying to redeem the fact that Hitler's a piece of shit, while also acknowledging that, yes, Jesus does still love him. Like, that's a hard discussion for every Christian. I used to have those same, like, God, yeah, well, here we go. No one's happy to hear that Hitler could be saved.
Kill baby Hitler. I don't know.
But then the conversation about the chocolate, it's this great little moment of, would you think Hitler would have sex for a bar of chocolate? And they all bust out laughing. And then we hold, and they stop laughing, right? And then we just hold, and they're driving. And then they start laughing again. Like, like it just circles around, because that's the way jokes, work.
Yeah.
Like, we're all thinking the same thing. We're still, well, that's still pretty good.
And there's a little, it feels like a little bit of I want to keep laughing.
Let's hold on to this moment. Yeah.
Let's hold on to this a little bit. Let's bring it back around and give me another 5 seconds of joy or whatever.
And I love it. That's such a patient little moment. It's so natural. I just wonder how much of that was accidental, and the director just saying, no, let's just sit and just see what happens. And then they just start laughing again. Like, that's a funny joke. Like, or if it was like, preconceived. It's hard to tell because they're all such good actors. To me, it feels accidental. But they're such good actors. It may very well be in the script. And okay, so cinematography, this is such an interesting looking film because it looks so contrasty, but it also kind of has this low contrast feel to it. And it's because of the highlights. The highlights are so well preserved. They're so pulled down. Like in the IRE, I want to say they're like at 70, 75 for the most part. There's moments where they peak higher depending on the shot and the scene. But when you're outside, like, the highlights are really well preserved and pulled down. And the blacks, the shadows are really low and sometimes crushed, and maybe just getting close to being crushed, maybe not super crushed, again, depending on the scene. And it gives us really low contrast, texture to the midtones while still giving you a lot of, range in your the overall look of the grade. And it's beautiful. Like, it looks great. It feels natural. It feels war. It's very desaturated, and looks amazing. The light, I love the naturalistic lighting. And what's tricky is you start shooting some of the stuff at night, which we only have the one scene at night. And you have to find a way to motivate your lighting. And for me, that final stand, really good. When the war kicks off, it's a very slow transition into nighttime. But before we get to nighttime, Nazis start scattering, the SS starts scattering, and they destroy that building that they went and checked out earlier. And it's great because there's a story motivation there, right? We don't want Nazis hiding in this building, taking pot shots at us. So let's take that building out. And that was great. Let's do another. And it sets that building on fire. And so the story motivation also provides a lighting motivation for the night scene, because now you have this big raging fire. Now we can just blast orange out everywhere, and it's going to look amazing. And because of all the smoke in the air, we can now diffuse all this, fire flame. And now it's just going to look freaking incredible, and dramatic. And it's going to look like the entire world is on fire, because the entire world kind of is on fire. And it's a very well constructed scene to provide story motivation for your lighting motivation, because otherwise you're faking moonlight, and we've seen that so many times, and it's fine, it looks good, but so much more satisfying in every way to have that fire there, and providing coverage, for your cinematography. I love it. But if you rewind before that, setting up and they're waiting, like Don's lighting as he's, sitting below the hatch. It's so good because it feels heavenly. And it should. He's at the hatch. That's where all the light is pouring in from. But it feels like a cloud has opened up directly to heaven, and God's looking down, and it's spilling onto him, and then trickling down onto his men, and mainly, Boyd and Grady, because the lighting for Norman is a little less, and it's coming through, the eye slits. Same thing for Gordo. But it's just so well motivated for Don's lighting to feel like, what? The heaven is opening up for him, and God's looking down. This is kind of the last moments. I don't know that that's what they were aiming for. I think at the end of the day, it's just natural, but I like that. I feel that way when I look at that scene. I'm thinking about, how do we want this to feel? You know what? Let's make it feel, like God's opening up the gates, because that's what's about to happen here. I don't know. It's very much Wes looking at it, but it's a nice thought to have if you're trying to figure out a way to make a scene feel a certain way. Let's play with it. What can we glean from the story that we can then imply through the lighting? That's cool stuff, I think. My only other thought here is with the sound design. The Tiger tank. We've been listening to tanks fire off for the entire movie, and they're big, they're boomy, big explosions. We see sparks fly when that stuff lands. How do you make a Tiger tank stand apart as something bigger and more ominous? What's crazy is that they do less. They pull back on the sound design. When that Tiger tank fires, it's a whistle with a little rumble of bass, and they dial back all the other sound design to give it room, to make it feel like it's just eating up all the sound through the lack of sound. It's ominous. Like when that thing fires and you hear it whistle, and there's just this big hollowness that surrounds it. It feels, like a bomb just got dropped on your face. Like, it's so weird and contradicting to everything that you would think. Bigger gun, bigger sound, right? Maybe not. Let's take this a different direction. Let's say the bullet is so big that it sweeps all the other sound around it completely away. Whoa, that's a different thought. I don't know, man. That the sound design is really, really good. Obviously, throughout the entire film, they're finding interesting ways to make every scene feel alive. But that one popped out to me like, whoa, that's
Great point.
That's something
Great
else.
Point. And man, the editing is so fantastic too. Just tied with the audio. I mean, every time they have to shoot, we need to see it get loaded. Because we need to be reminded that this is not an automatic weapon. This is something that takes multiple men to handle and to shoot, right? You need somebody to load it. You need someone to be directing. You need someone to be aiming and pulling the trigger. And we need to see that every single time, or at least 95% of the time. And so the editing for every single shot has to be specific, right? It has to be timed well. The audio has to be there. We need to hear the shell being picked up, hear it put into the gun itself, hear the door slam. And then I don't know if this is accurate, but it's so awesome. The on white. Every time when Shia LaBeouf yells on white, and then it's so like, I get goosebumps every time. I don't know why. I think I think it's because of Shia LaBeouf. I really do think it's because his acting is just so good, and there's urgency behind it every time he says it. And there's so much urgency behind it. It's just so good. So yeah, the editing behind all of the sound design too is fantastic. So yeah, there's literally nothing I don't think that I would have done different about this film. I mean, the only thing that felt a little, I'm not sure, is when the Germans saw Norman under the tank and didn't say anything. But I forgive that because he's young.
That was what
he's Norman, but on the German side.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I picked out too, because he's clean faced, he's young, hasn't had his hands dirtied yet, and Norman just ran into himself, where maybe the conscience of soldiers in Germany are trying to find their way out as well, because at the end of the day they did. Like, it's not like every single fighter in Germany died. No, like, people had to come to grips and terms, and I can only imagine what it's like in Germany watching Americans pump out World War II films, like we're, I don't know, making bottled water. It's just, by the thousands over here. Every year, there's a new, film where Germany's the bad guy. Like, is it passé? Do you just watch it as a popcorn film, or do you avoid it altogether? I have no idea. Maybe one of our German friends can let us know. How do you respond to World War II films? But it is nice, I think, to see a glimpse of that from them in this movie, where you just see, like, he looks and he's almost just kind of entertained by it, like, little white boy there hiding under the tank, huh?
Yeah.
There you are. I see you.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta go. But that is it's an interesting moment, and I'm glad it's in there, because someone at some point would probably want to inspect a little closer, but
yeah,
why not have it another Norman, like you said?
Yeah.
But I agree, man, for a movie that runs 2:15, like, it's tight. It's not a lot of, there's no fat on the bone. They find a way to get you in and out of action scenes and have some philosophical conversations. Ideals are great, but this is war, it's messy, and it's not what you think, it's not what you want it to be. It's what it is. As Grady eloquently put it, like, what happened, what's going to happen is going to happen. And the sooner you come to terms with that, the sooner maybe you can get through this war and make it out the other side. I don't know. I'm glad I've never fought in a war. And if I can make it through the rest of my life without, having to, I'd call that a good life.
Yeah, man. Yeah. But if I, and I've thought about this too, if I were to, I would hope that it would be something like a cause like World War II.
Agreed.
So all of these are the greatest generation. These are the guys who, I mean, look, I'm not taking anything away from military now. I think that it's necessary for sure, and important. But I'm just saying, like this, and I think everybody would probably agree, like this war was necessary. Unfortunately, was necessary, and for these guys to do what they did in the time they did it with what they had, it's pretty crazy, pretty incredible. And this movie doesn't, to your point earlier, you know, about glorifying war and how a lot of movies tend to inevitably do that. This movie doesn't for me, you know, like there's no there's no moment where I'm like, yeah, let's do this. It's total opposite of like 300.
Right.
The point is to motivate you to like just power through. Like this is not that at all.
That's such a good point, because, you know, we did 300 last week and we're doing Fury this week, about, you know, a group of guys, small contingent taking on a large contingent. And you're completely right. The emotional result of these films could not be more polar opposites. You do walk out of 300 wanting to punch a wall. You walk out of Fury saying, thank God I wasn't there. Like, I want nothing to do with that. And just nothing but awe and respect for people who have had to do that, for sure. Yeah. I think that's, let me take a glance, but yeah, I'm good.
Gotcha.
What are you going to recommend this week, Todd?
All right. So this week I'm going to recommend a kind of a classic, I guess I'll say, is Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which I haven't watched in a while, and I need to go watch again. Just a you know, timeless masterpiece, honestly, and was really hard for him to shoot, to film, to finish, but he felt a need to do that, and thankfully for us, he did. So yeah, Apocalypse Now.
Nicely done. I'm gonna recommend some documentaries. Now, before we started rolling, I was complaining about, I was whinging about documentaries just aren't great. I think for the last, really close to 20 years now. Not because there haven't been any good documentaries, but by and large, documentaries are there to sell. And it's hard to sell by being nuanced in your conversation. And so I think a lot of documentary filmmakers are saying, what can I sell? What opinion do I need to have? And how do I back my way into that opinion? And therefore craft a story that poses as journalism, which is what documentaries are kind of there to do, to kind of, for the most part, you know, be a journalistic discovery of truth. When in reality, they're like just preconceived beliefs passed off as, you know, journalism. And so there's just very few documentaries that are actually open and just challenging you, and without providing you with an answer. To me, that's normally going to be what truth and reality is. It's much more explorative. And to that end, I think the one of the very rare few places of consistent, great journalistic documentaries is PBS Frontline. If you want to get your mind wrapped around something, go look at PBS Frontline and see if they've done a documentary on it. They're so good at not putting their thumb on the scale of asking questions, interviewing people, and not saying, here's your answer. Here's what you need to think. Here's what you need to believe. And just really letting you wrestle with it. And they're not afraid to say this happened, you know, and here's, you know, the reality of it. But they'll also complicate it. And if you find yourself watching things that don't complicate the issue for you, Fury complicates the issue for you from beginning to end. PBS Frontline does a wonderful job of complicating what society would otherwise make you think are very simple issues. So yeah, check out PBS Frontline. Pretty much any of their documentaries. I haven't watched all of them by far, but you know, the 20, 30 of them that I have seen have always been excellent. Go watch their ones during the Iraq War, for instance, in the early 2000s.
Man.
Like even then, the whole country was on fire to go to war with Iraq. And here's Frontline saying, well, what do we think about that? They're a treasure. They're an absolute treasure. Yeah. So stay tuned for next week. We are going to take a look at the sequel to this little sci-fi, Think I Can Do It, Thomas the Train Engine, Dune Part 2. It's a train, all right, and it's rolling through. Yeah. Denny, finally a new Denny film, bro. We're almost out, and here we are with the new one. Yes,
we're back,
baby. Dune Part 2. Take a look at that, and if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review. We haven't had a new review in like a year, so I'd love to read a new review on the air, and leave us a note if there's something you want us to cover, a film we haven't done yet. We've done 266 of them now, so maybe there's one.
We're running out.
We're running and low. Your fires run low, my lord. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/fury.
And our quote of the day today is from Roger Ebert. I've always felt that movies are an emotional medium, that movies are not the way to make an intellectual argument. Tell me about that.
That's so interesting to me. And I see what he means. Like, you can make an argument. He's not saying you can't make arguments. He's just saying because of the medium, it's always going to be an emotional argument. That it's really hard to have an intellectual argument because of the way you're crafting the movie. And I think he goes on to say in that quote, the director is here saying, look at this. Now look at this. Now feel this way. Like, how intellectual is that to be forced down a path? Whereas in an article or in a book, there's so much more space for you to pause and to think about and to rebut before continuing. There's no space for that in a movie. The next moment's coming. You're onto, and so it's a more emotional engagement. It's not to say I think he's 100% correct, but I think that's a very strong line of reasoning. And watching a movie like Fury, you can walk away from it feeling very complex feelings about war, and you can have these intellectual discussions afterwards. But I don't think the movie itself has a lot of space to intellectually engage you. They make an intellectual point and then engage your emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have,
there's no back and forth.
There's no back and forth. And what I love about this film too is it's not very decisive about its intellectual engagement either. Like, you never walk away saying Don was right or Norman was right. Like, if you do, man, the world might be a little too black and white for you. You need more gray, because Norman's watching this prisoner get killed. Like, you can't feel black and white about that. Whereas you're on the front line and people are firing, you fire back. That is black and white. And so I love this movie for that reason, because it's not, it's engaging your emotions while trying to engage your intellect. But ultimately, Ebert's right. It is an emotional experience. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation whether you're watching a movie or thinking about creating a story. Like, how much are you engaging someone intellectually, and how honest can you be whenever you're trying to make an intellectual film, and what goes into helping the audience engage intellectually instead of emotionally. And that's where I think films can start pulling you back from the emotion by tipping their hat to this is a movie, by showing you a long, exaggerated camera move and calling attention to that was a camera move. Look at this cool camera thing. Whenever you do that kind of thing, now you can emotionally pull back. This is, again, still part of this subreddit thread that I came across. And there was some really interesting conversations around this idea. And I was like, yeah, it's a fascinating point of when to pull someone out of the story. There could be a good reason, actually, to make someone stop engaging with the story so that they engage with the story on a more macro level as a person watching a movie. Yeah.
That was a lot.
That's a lot going on there.
Trying to like follow.
Right.
I mean,
because if you do say you're in the middle of watching a movie, let's say you're in the middle of watching Fury, and whatever, let's just say a boom shot creeps in or something that tips your hat. I mean, I've thought about doing something like that where, you know, you get halfway into a movie and suddenly you're seeing the camera crew in a movie. And now I've thought about using some of these ideas to call attention to you are emotionally engaged in the story, but now you're consciously aware that you're watching a movie. How does that change the experience of what you're watching? And how do you no longer buy into the story and call attention to the idea that the filmmaker is forcing you to engage? Like, I like all that kind of intellectualizing of film. And there's other ways to do that without being so on the nose, that suddenly you hold on a shot too long, or do some fancy camera move, strip away the sound. There's ways to get people to eject and start to say, oh, how do I feel about this now that I'm thinking about the story that I've been forced to watch? Stuff like, and I was wondering if you were going to talk about or recommend the new film, the World War II film. I'm forgetting everything about it, that you've been talking about seeing, the Zone of Interest.
I haven't been able to see it.
Fascinating. And so, yeah, there's ways to make people engage with the fact that you're telling a story and also engage with the fact that this is a real event, without, I don't know. Sorry, that's a lot of babbling, but that quote sent me on a whole journey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I've never looked at it that way. I just feel like movies are their own thing, and I like being like part of what I think movies are great at is the same thing as like going to see a good concert. It's like the world is somewhere else. You know, right now I'm here and this is where I'm going to spend the next 2 hours and nothing else exists, kind of thing. Or all of my troubles are somewhere else. And so I kind of like almost don't want that. I don't want an intellectual argument. I'm already exhausted from the day. The last thing I want is for a film to be intellectualized to me in a lot of ways, unless I know it going in, okay, I'll prepare to work, like, okay. So yeah, I think I agree to pretty large extent, but I'm sure this is probably a good, I look at it as like a challenge for a good filmmaker. Like, okay, how can we do this and prove Roger Ebert wrong? That'd be fun and interesting, So anyway,
Nice.
Dude, this has been an awesome episode. When we talked about doing this, I got really excited. I watched it twice, and both times, I was just excited to talk about it. I think it's one of my favorite war movies, and honestly, watching it concerns. I look at it as this is a type of movie. It's like a road back to what movies used to do just 5 years ago. Honestly, since COVID, I mean, I just feel like people have forgotten how to make a good movie. Like, what is the deal? Things are unmotivated, like edits are weird. We're put in strange places that don't make any sense. The shots don't look composed correctly a lot of times, and this film is absolutely flawless in all of those things. It's perfect, and I hope that filmmakers, the big ones and the small ones, look at a film like this and they use it as a lighthouse, a guidepost to get back to since COVID. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps. It really does. And like Wes said, please shoot us a review. We would really love that, and we'd really appreciate it. If there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart, let us know that too. Maybe we'll cover it. Who knows? Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. On boy!